Hey guys, and welcome to Open Table. We're so glad you're here with us today. We're going through the book of Psalms together, and I just want to encourage you, get involved in the conversation today. You're able to share your doubts and ask questions here. We want you to share open and honestly what you think and feel about God, about faith in the Bible. So again, we're so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Hey guys, welcome back and thank you for coming to Open Table. Today we're going to continue our discussion through the book of Psalms. And remember, this is a place where you can ask questions if you're ready to seek answers. So don't be afraid to express doubt, ask the hard questions, and really press in to the discussion time, okay? So remember, through studying the book of Psalms, we're seeing how David and the authors of Psalms interact with God, how there's sort of them talking to God very often and them hearing wisdom from God. And last week we talked about in Psalm chapter 10 how we see the character of God, in that even though it seems like he's absent, he really is close, and his track record outweighs our emotions. So this week we're going to look at the character of God in a different way, and how he never changes, how he's constant throughout all of time. And so don't forget, this is a place where you can be real, where you can be honest. And so let's get started by just breaking the ice with a question. Okay, so Psalm 90 is actually written by Moses. And if you know anything about the Bible, if you grew up in church, you probably heard some type of story about this guy Moses. And he was definitely a person that let God lead him in a lot of different ways. And so just to quickly kind of recount this story, he was a guy who was an Israelite and was raised in the Egyptian home in the palace. And eventually he goes and he spends a bunch of time out in the desert after murdering a guy. He can't talk right, he stutters when he talks. And God chooses to use this guy Moses to set the people of Israel free. He uses Moses to lead this kind of revolution of sorts to free the people of Israel from the Egyptian bondage. And so Moses, as you can see, or as you remember, is no stranger to the faithfulness of God. So despite all of his challenges, he like I said, he couldn't talk right. There was many things that made him not the ideal candidate, but God remains sort of faithful, and God empowers Moses at the times that he needs it. And that's why he opens up this prayer in Psalm 90, recounting, again, this remembering who God is. And so in verse 1 of Psalm 90, it says this: Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Moses speaks to this fact that God is the only thing in life that is constant. He's everlasting, he's unchanging. He went before us, before there was anything. He was, and after we're gone, God will still be. And it actually seems like our world is changing faster really than it ever has changed before. Culture is changing. Things that are popular are changing so fast. They're going in and out of popularity like crazy. Okay, so here's a great example. In 6th grade, right, I was a little chubby kid going into middle school. You know what was super popular? This thing called Pokemon. And now here I am, a full-grown man, got kids, got a mortgage, and you know what's popular? Pokemon. And so, what's the deal with that? With everything changing so fast, where does God fit into that? Why don't you discuss that with your table? Okay, so the adverse of thinking about the vastness of God is how very small and temporary life is for us. So you think about that, and since before time, God was there. Before the world was created, when it was void of all form, God was there. And you think about how many of us have come and gone, how many babies were born, how many people have breathed their last breath, and yet God was before all of those things, and God will continue to be behind all of those things, or after all of those things. And you think about that, and Moses does such a good job of painting this picture of how short life is, the brevity of life, how fast it goes by, and who really is the boss and who really is in charge in the moments of our lives. So in verses 3 through 8 of Psalm chapter 90, it reads like this: "You return man to dust and say, 'Return, O children of man.' For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream. The grass that is renewed in the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence." Moses had seen and experienced so much in his life. You think about the people of Israel that he led and wandered around in the desert with. He was the leader of a 1,000,000-person kind of big nation that was moving throughout all the desert and moving throughout trying to get to the promised land. And yet, even as he was this great leader in some respects, he knew that God was the boss. And even a great man is just a man, but God is a guiding force to greatness. We talked about in service last week that true north is the only way to get to where you were meant to go. In our life, it really is that short. It is really that temporary. And what we do with the time that we have does matter. We can drift into random things, or we can let God drive us into great things. And no one ever drifts into something wonderful. So with your tables, discuss this question: does knowing that your time on earth is short change the way you think you should be living? How should we use the time we have, and why? All right, Moses is this great example of a man who let God drive him into something great. If you remember the story of Moses from the beginning, he was a very unlikely candidate to do anything great with his life. But you see that he really did let God drive him into his destiny or the thing for which he was to do for God. And so he is a key instrument in the greatest rescue of all time, really. And his understanding of a faithful and constant God really did make all the difference. And I love just this one single verse from Psalm chapter 90. It's verse 12. I love where it says, "So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom." So the question that we really do have to ask ourselves is, are we drifting or are we driving? Are we drifting into whatever comes next, whatever might happen, and just sort of see where it ends up? Or are we letting God drive us into something great, something that's going to make a difference in the world? And when I look at my life, and when you look at your life, have we really put our hope in the wrong thing? No, nobody stays the same, and what seems to be good today isn't good tomorrow. Nothing stays the same in our culture. We're changing constantly. So we have to put our hope in something that is unchanging, something that's constant, and something that's everlasting. So as we discuss our final question this week, I want you to think about this, ponder this, and process this with your group. Who or what do you think is actually most guiding your life? Are they worthy of hope being placed in them? All right, guys, well, I hope that our time together has made you think I hope it's a place where you can continue to go and process. So if you remember, the main point from our time together was actually that true north is the only way to get where you were meant to go, and that nobody drifts into something wonderful. Nobody accidentally stumbles upon something great. And hopefully you can take that bit of information, go home and process that, or if you'd like to continue the conversation, go ahead and get one of the leaders. They'd love to keep talking with you and helping you through some of these challenges that you might be facing. And also, it's a really good opportunity to go home and talk with your parents and continue a conversation that way. I hope to see you next week, and thanks again for coming.